In the span of just 13 years, one man conquered most of the known world. He was never defeated in battle. He built an empire that stretched from Greece to India, covering over 2 million square miles. His legacy would shape civilization for millennia to come. This is the story of Alexander the Great, a king who became a legend, and a legend who became immortal. Born into royalty, trained by the greatest philosopher of his age, and driven by an insatiable ambition, Alexander of Macedon would accomplish more in his 32 years than most could in several lifetimes. But who was the man behind the myth? What drove him to risk everything, again and again? And how did a young prince from the edges of the Greek world become the most powerful ruler on earth? Today, we journey through the life of history's most extraordinary conqueror, from his birth in the ancient kingdom of Macedon to his mysterious death in Babylon. Cunning diplomat, Philip was transforming Macedon from a backwater kingdom into a formidable military power. He created the Macedonian phalanx, a revolutionary infantry formation that would become the most feared fighting force in the ancient world. Long spears called sarissas, measuring up to 18 feet, created an almost impenetrable wall of bronze and iron. Young Alexander grew up in this world of military innovation and political intrigue. His mother, Olympias, was a princess from Epirus, known for her fierce temperament and devotion to ecstatic religious cults. She filled Alexander's head with tales of his divine ancestry, claiming descent from Achilles on her side and from Heracles on Philip's side. These were not just stories to Alexander. He genuinely believed he was destined for greatness, that divine blood flowed through his veins. The relationship between Alexander's parents The story of Achilles, the greatest warrior who chose glory and an early death over a long, obscure life, resonated deeply with Alexander. It was a choice he seemed determined to emulate. But Alexander was not just a scholar. At age 12, he demonstrated the courage and intelligence that would define his career. A horse trader brought to Philip's court an enormous black stallion named Bucephalus. The horse was wild, uncontrollable, and everyone who tried to mount him was thrown. Philip ordered the horse taken away, but Alexander begged for a chance to try. The young prince had noticed something the others had missed. The horse was afraid of his own shadow. Alexander turned Bucephalus toward the sun, so the shadow fell behind, spoke softly to him, and mounted the wild stallion. Philip, watching his son ride the untamable horse, reportedly said with tears in his eyes, "My son, seek out a kingdom equal to yourself. Macedon is too small for you." Bucephalus Alexander was left as regent of Macedon. When a Thracian tribe rebelled, the teenage prince didn't hesitate. He led an army, crushed the rebellion, drove out the inhabitants, and founded a colony of Greeks and Macedonians in their place, naming it Alexandropolis, the first of many cities that would bear his name. 2 years later, at the Battle of Chaeronea in 338 BCE, 18-year-old Alexander commanded the Macedonian cavalry in Philip's greatest victory. The combined forces of Athens and Thebes, the proud city-states of southern Greece, were crushed. Alexander personally led the decisive charge that broke the Theban sacred band, an elite unit that had never been defeated. Greece was now under Macedonian control, and Philip began planning an invasion of the Persian Empire. But the relationship between father and son was deteriorating. When Philip took a new wife, Cleopatra Eurydice, a Macedonian noblewoman, the implications were dangerous. This wife could produce a fully Macedonian heir, while Alexander's mother was a foreigner. At the wedding feast, Cleopatra's uncle made a toast, hoping for a legitimate heir. Alexander hurled his cup at the man, shouting, "What am I, a bastard?" Philip, drunk, drew his sword and lunged at his son, only to trip and fall. Alexander mocked him. "Here is the man who was preparing to cross from Europe to Asia, and who cannot even cross from one couch to another." Alexander and Olympias fled to Epirus. Though they eventually returned, the rift between father and son never fully healed. Then, in 336 BCE, at the wedding of Philip's daughter, the king was assassinated by one of his own bodyguards. The Illyrian tribes, sensing weakness with the change in leadership, were raiding Macedonian territory. Alexander couldn't launch his planned invasion of Persia with enemies at his back. So, in 335 BCE, he marched north with devastating efficiency. The campaign in Thrace demonstrated Alexander's military genius. At the Shipka Pass, he faced a Thracian army that had positioned wagons on a slope above the narrow pass. The plan was simple but effective. Release the wagons to roll down and crush the Macedonians as they tried to force the passage. Alexander's solution was brilliant. He ordered his men to form their phalanx where the ground was level so the wagons would lose momentum. Where the ground was too steep, soldiers were to part ranks and let the wagons pass through. Or if that failed, to lie down with their shields locked overhead, letting the wagons roll over them. The tactic worked perfectly. The wagons caused minimal casualties, and Alexander's phalanx stormed up the slope and routed the Thracians. He then moved against the Illyrians, who had trapped his army in a valley. Using a combination of tactical retreat and sudden, fierce counterattack, Alexander Alexander escaped the trap and defeated the larger Illyrian force, his soldiers learned a lesson they would never forget. No matter how dire the situation appeared, Alexander would find a way to victory. But while Alexander was in the north, disaster struck. A rumor spread through Greece that Alexander had been killed in battle. Thebes, believing the rumor, rose in full revolt. They besieged the Macedonian garrison in their citadel and called on all of Greece to join them in throwing off the Macedonian yoke. Alexander's response was terrifying in its swiftness and fury. He force-marched his army south, covering the distance so quickly that Thebes didn't believe he was approaching until his army appeared before their walls. He offered mercy if they would surrender. The Thebans refused. What followed was one of the most controversial acts of Alexander's career. In September 335 BCE, Alexander stormed Thebes. The city, one of the greatest in all of Greece, was completely destroyed. 6,000 Thebans were killed in the fighting. The survivors, some 30,000 men, women, and children, were sold into slavery. Every building was razed to the ground except for the temples and the house of Pindar, the famous poet whom Alexander admired. The destruction of Thebes shocked the Greek world. Alexander had made his point in the most brutal way possible. Rebellion against Macedonian rule would not be tolerated. No city in Greece would dare oppose him after this. Athens, which had supported the Theban revolt with words but not deeds, hastily sent envoys to beg forgiveness. Alexander granted it, pragmatically recognizing that he needed Greek cooperation, not their destruction. Now finally, Alexander could turn his attention to the great prize, the Persian Empire, the richest and most powerful realm on earth. It was time to avenge the Persian invasions of Greece that had occurred 150 years earlier, to fulfill his father's dream, and to pursue his own destiny. In the spring of 334 BCE, Alexander crossed the Hellespont into Asia with an army of approximately 40,000 infantry and 5,000 cavalry. He would never return. When Alexander crossed into Asia, he performed a symbolic act that revealed his sense of destiny. He hurled his spear into Asian soil, claiming the entire continent as Spear-Won territory. Then he traveled to Troy, where he honored his hero Achilles at his tomb and dedicated his armor there, taking in exchange armor said to be from the Trojan War itself. He would carry this shield into battle throughout his campaigns. The Persian Empire that Alexander challenged was immense, stretching from Egypt to India, from the Mediterranean to Central Asia. It had existed for over 200 years and was ruled by Darius. Measured in numbers. His army was the finest fighting force in the world, professional soldiers trained in Philip's revolutionary tactics. The Macedonian phalanx, with its long sarissas, was virtually unbreakable from the front. The companion cavalry, the elite horsemen that Alexander personally commanded, could smash through almost any enemy formation. And Alexander himself was a military genius who combined strategic planning with tactical flexibility and personal courage that inspired fanatical loyalty in his men. The first test came quickly. Persian satraps, the regional governors of the empire's western territories, assembled an army and waited for Alexander at the Granicus River in May 334 BCE. The Persians had a strong defensive position, with their cavalry lined up along the far bank of the river and infantry behind them. Their plan was to meet Alexander's forces as they struggled out of the water, cutting them down before they could form up. Alexander's generals advised caution. It was late in the day, the river crossing would be difficult, and attacking uphill from water against a prepared enemy was tactically unsound. They suggested waiting until the next day. Alexander refused. He understood the psychological dimension of warfare. A bold attack now would demonstrate his confidence and might shatter Persian morale. As Alexander led the companion cavalry into the river, the battle became a chaotic melee. This was not the organized phalanx warfare that the Macedonians excelled at. It was a swirling cavalry fight in the water, soldiers slipping on stones, horses screaming, weapons flashing. Alexander plunged into the thickest fighting, always identifiable by the white plumes on his helmet. At one point, Alexander was nearly killed. His helmet was split. without a fight. Those that resisted were besieged and captured. Alexander's strategy was to secure the coastline, denying the powerful Persian navy any bases. It was a plan that required patience and systematical execution, but it would work. By winter 334 BCE, Alexander reached Gordium, an ancient city in central Anatolia. Here was located the famous Gordian knot, a complex knot tied in cornel bark, attached to an ancient wagon. Legend said that whoever untied this knot would rule all of Asia. Many had tried. All had failed. The story goes that Alexander, shown the knot, drew his sword and sliced through it with a single stroke. Whether this actually happened or is propaganda is debatable, but it perfectly captures Alexander's approach: direct, bold, refusing to be bound by traditional limitations. Why spend hours trying to untangle a knot when you can simply cut it? In November 333 BCE, Alexander faced his first real test against a Persian royal army. Darius III himself had marched west with a massive force, reportedly numbering in the hundreds of thousands. The armies met at Issus, in a narrow coastal plain in southern Anatolia. The narrow battlefield neutralized the Persian numerical advantage. Darius couldn't deploy his full army, and the terrain favored the disciplined Macedonian phalanx over the more loosely organized Persian infantry. But it was still a fierce battle, and Darius had positioned Greek mercenary infantry in his center. Knowing they were the only troops who could match the Macedonian phalanx, Alexander, as always, led from the front with his companion cavalry. He identified the key to victory: Darius himself. The Persian king stood in his chariot in the center of his army, surrounded by his royal guard. If Alexander could reach Darius, if he could kill or capture the Persian king, the battle would be over. With characteristic boldness, Alexander formed his cavalry into a wedge and charged directly at the Persian center. It was a desperate gambit. As the companions plunged into the Persian lines, the Macedonian left flank was collapsing under Persian cavalry attacks. Alexander's own phalanx was under tremendous pressure from the Greek mercenaries. But on an island half a mile offshore. It had powerful walls, controlled by skilled sailors and soldiers, and was supplied by sea. It had never been successfully besieged. The Tyrians were confident that Alexander, lacking a significant navy, could do nothing to them. They were wrong. What followed was one of the most remarkable sieges in ancient history. Alexander ordered the construction of a causeway, a mole, from the mainland to the island. His soldiers tore down the ruins of the old mainland city of Tyre and used the stones to build a road across the sea. It was an engineering marvel and an act of astonishing determination. The Tyrians attacked the causeway repeatedly, setting fire to the siege towers Alexander constructed, raining missiles down on the workers. Alexander responded by gathering ships from other Phoenician cities that had surrendered to him, assembling a fleet that could challenge Tyre's naval supremacy. The siege became a battle of wills, engineering, and innovation. For 7 months, the siege continued. Alexander built massive siege towers on ships, developed naval rams to breach the walls, and personally led assault after assault. Finally, in July 332 BCE, the wall and Alexander's causeway, built from necessity, permanently connected the island to the mainland. It remains there today, transformed over centuries into a permanent land bridge. The fall of Tyre secured the eastern Mediterranean for Alexander. The Persian fleet, without bases, was effectively neutralized. The path to Egypt lay open. Egypt welcomed Alexander as a liberator. The Persians had ruled Egypt for 200 years, and they were hated by the native population. The Persian satrap surrendered without resistance. Alexander traveled to Memphis, the ancient capital, where he was crowned pharaoh in traditional Egyptian ceremonies. He performed sacrifices to Egyptian gods, particularly Apis, the sacred bull, showing respect for Egyptian religion that contrasted sharply with the Persians' contemptuous treatment of local beliefs. But Alexander's most significant act in Egypt was his visit to the Oracle of Amun at the Siwa oasis in the western desert. This journey, across hundreds of miles of barren wasteland, was both dangerous and seemingly pointless from a military perspective. But to Alexander it was essential. What happened at Siwa remains mysterious. The oracle's priest greeted Alexander as the son of Amun, whom the Greeks identified with Zeus. In the inner sanctum, Alexander asked questions that only he and the oracle knew. When he emerged, he would never fully reveal what he had been told. But from this moment forward, Alexander seemed to believe he was truly time to assemble a new army, reportedly even larger than the one destroyed at Issus. The final confrontation was coming. Alexander marched east, crossing from Syria into Mesopotamia, heading toward the heart of the Persian Empire. Darius had chosen his ground carefully. At Gaugamela, near the ancient city of Nineveh in northern Mesopotamia, the Persian king assembled an army that may have numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Ancient sources claim even more, but those numbers are certainly exaggerated. Still, the Persians vastly outnumbered Alexander's force of approximately 47,000. Darius had learned from his defeats. He chose a wide, flat plain where his numerical superiority could be used fully. He had the ground leveled and cleared to allow his scythed chariots to charge effectively. These terrifying weapons, with blades attached to their wheels and poles, were designed to tear through infantry formations. He also had brought Indian war elephants, creatures the Macedonians had never encountered. On the night before the battle, October 1st, 331 BCE, Alexander's generals urged him to attack in darkness, to use surprise to offset the Persian advantage. Alexander refused with a line that became famous: "I will not steal victory." The truth was more complex than bravado. A night attack against an enemy on prepared ground was extremely risky. Alexander was confident in his strategy, and he knew that a clear, Decisive victory in daylight would have far greater psychological impact than a confused night engagement. As dawn broke, the armies faced each other across the plain. The Persian line stretched beyond the Macedonian line on both sides, threatening to envelop Alexander's smaller force. Darius's plan was to hold Alexander's phalanx in the center while his cavalry swept around the flanks and attacked from behind. Alexander's strategy was more subtle. He began moving his entire army obliquely to the right, diagonally across the field. This movement threatened to take his army off the prepared ground onto rough terrain where the scythed chariots would be useless. Darius, alarmed, ordered his left-wing cavalry to stop this movement. It was exactly what Alexander wanted. As the Persian cavalry moved to his right, a gap opened in the Persian line. Alexander had been watching for this moment. He formed his companion cavalry into a wedge formation and charged directly at this gap, heading straight for Darius himself, just as he had at Issus. The battle dissolved into a massive, swirling melee. The scythed chariots charged but were largely ineffective. The Macedonians simply opened ranks and let them through, pelting them with javelins. The war elephants, few in number and poorly deployed, caused more confusion than damage. But the battle hung in balance. The Persian right-wing cavalry broke through and attacked the Macedonian camp. In the center, the phalanx was under severe campaign began with a demonstration of the terror Alexander could inspire. The city of Macedonia resisted. After a fierce siege, Alexander offered terms. The defenders could leave unharmed. As the Indian mercenaries marched out, Alexander's forces suddenly attacked, massacring them all. It was a treacherous act that horrified even Alexander's own historians. But it had its intended effect. Other cities surrendered without resistance. But not all Indian rulers submitted. King Porus of the Parava kingdom, controlling territory between the Hydaspes and Icesines rivers, prepared to resist. When Alexander reached the Hydaspes River in May 326 BCE, he found Porus waiting on the opposite bank with an army that included something Alexander had never faced in large numbers: war.